Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning for our AI Service Desk Automation presented by Servicely. Appreciate you taking the time out to spend some time with us and really just step through some of the questions and options that we see customers looking at in a time when the service desk is overwhelmed by service requests and they're looking to do service automation and not quite sure where they should start that journey. So session today, a bit of housekeeping before we kick things off. The session is being recorded. Your details are kept private, however. Session will be recorded and made available to you after this session. We'll run for 30 minutes today and we'll keep time for questions and answers. Certainly during the session, as we are going through, if you have any questions, please put them into the questions box, and I'll certainly endeavour to answer those at the end of the session. If we don't cover off all of the questions, I'll ensure that I capture answers to those questions and distribute those after the session for everybody. So what will we look at today? So really, I think it's important for us to understand what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve and why do we care. This problem is not unique. It's not a new problem. It may have been exaggerated by the current circumstances that organizations find themselves in, but it's been around for a while. So I think it's important for us to really understand the problem we're trying to solve. We've tried in the past, we failed. Why is that we failed? And then looking at artificial intelligence, what opportunities does that bring for us to try and solve this problem in a very different way? So with that in mind, we'll then have a look at the benefits. So ultimately, what do we get out of this approach? And during the session, we'll answer some of the common questions that we often see from customers is around, am my data ready to support artificial intelligence? There's certainly, and rightfully so, a view out there that you need to have large volumes of data in order to train machines to start to do automation. We'll cover off, do you have enough data? Do I need to get my knowledge base cleaned up? Specifically, when we're looking at the service desk, there's certainly a view of, do I need to have my knowledge base ready to be able to be consumed by a chatbot or a semantic search engine to be able to deliver benefits? And we'll have a look at what the options are for that, or at least discuss it. What skills do I need? Certainly, if we wind the clock back to 2010, 2011, as we started to see artificial intelligence becoming very topical in the academic community again, and then becoming more mainstream commercial around 2014, 2015, there was certainly a view of the kind of skill sets, and certainly in those days you needed those skill sets. But we'll have a discussion around what's required when we look at today as a commercial organization looking to adopt artificial intelligence, what type of skills you should anticipate requiring. And ultimately, the big question is, where do I start and how do I measure success? Importantly, how do I measure success back to the business? There seems to be a bit of apprehensiveness when we talk about artificial intelligence. Some organizations are a bit concerned about how well it will be received in the business, and therefore there's a level of apprehension. And I don't think that needs to be the case, and we'll certainly see how we're able to address that during this session. So with that, let's have a look at the problem and why do we care. So ultimately, the problem, as I suggested, is nothing new, is we have customers on the one side, be those internal customers, i.e. our employees, or be those external facing if you're looking at it from an external customer facing. Ultimately, we have multiple channels coming into the service desk, and we have a customer who has a request or an issue, or they're contacting you because they need something. You either need to fix something for them, or they're looking for information, or you need to do something for them. And ultimately, we then have the service desk who's trying to facilitate that work, either solving it at first contact or ultimately moving that off to second level if required. And as the service desk becomes overwhelmed, and the service desk is now having to deal with a large volume of incoming calls from all these different channels, we tend to start to see the staff costs going up. So we're having to add more people to the service desk to deal with more calls, and that's almost a linear equation where as you add more people, so the costs go up to deal with more calls, and ultimately customer satisfaction starts to go down. So one of the things we've seen is we then start to shift to reduce the cost. We then shifted offshore to lower labor cost markets to try and deal with the volumes. But invariably, we start to see certain issues around customer satisfaction. And even then, you know, once you've hit the new baseline of the labor cost, you're back to the same equation. More calls mean more people, and the service desk experience starts to decline, and we're back into the same circle. And this has been happening for a long time, since service desks or help desks back in the day were started. So what organizations have wanted to do is it's really this conversation that's around shift left. So this whole notion of how do I move the support to the left, i.e. self-service. So there's been a belief and a lot of money invested by organizations. I'll build a really nice self-service portal, and I will enable the users to self-serve. That means I'll have fewer calls coming, especially low volume, low complexity calls coming into the service desk, and users will solve their calls quicker, faster, and they'll be happy. I think as organizations have realized, building a self-service portal doesn't simply mean people will use it, nor will it solve the issues that they have. And there's a number of reasons for that, including everything from the taxonomy and the language that a user explains or describes their problem to how the person in IT felt that this is how they would describe the problem, and therefore here's what you need to solve it. So there's a number of issues there. So we have this shift left is where everybody's trying to move to. If we look at the old way of doing it, and the way we typically do it today is very much around, we have a rule-based workflow system. Let's call that our service desk. We have customers on the left, and we have the business support functions on the right. In the world we live in today, knowledge is largely static. Somebody has to go and create knowledge, edit it, publish it, and make it available and hope it gets consumed to solve the issues. Technology is used by people to enforce process. So we've developed the ITIL framework, and we've said, right, that's how we're now going to run our service desk, and these are the processes we're going to use. Knowledge is difficult to find, and a large part of that is these knowledge silos that tend to exist within the enterprise. Whilst the desire for many organizations is to put all the knowledge into the knowledge base of the service desk, invariably there's knowledge sitting in Confluence, SharePoint, and other knowledge repositories around the organization. So trying to find that becomes really difficult. The other thing we see is that the customer experience is determined by the knowledge of the support agent. So if you are sitting on the service desk for 2 years, you've probably heard or dealt with a particular call n number of times over your period there, and therefore you're a lot more efficient at doing it. New person comes onto the service desk, and the challenge that they have is they've never heard of it, so they will then be less efficient at solving that until such time as they've done that enough times. And there's limited opportunity for automation in these traditional systems. So where the future is moving to is really looking at this multi-channel conversational intelligent interface. So everybody's talking about chatbots and looking to how we can use chatbots. And they're certainly a part of the solution, but not the full solution. We're really looking to drive self-service. We're looking to federate knowledge. So bring that knowledge together to a centralized, federated knowledge store, at least from an indexing and a searching perspective, to make the right knowledge available at the right time. We now start to see technologies augmenting and enhancing people and process. So certainly in the early days of the chatbot hype cycle, there was this perception that, or view that, the chatbots would replace people on the service desk. I don't believe that's the case, and I think evidence has shown that ultimately people will still need to be driving the service desk. But what we can do is certainly offload those high volume, low complexity, repetitive type tasks that, one, the service desk agents don't enjoy doing, and two, can easily be done by a machine, freeing up the service desk agents to deal with the more complex issues that the service desk has to deal with. We're providing contextual awareness to drive customer intimacy, understand the customer, understand the context of their relationship with you, and providing a deeply personalized experience, and ultimately being able to scale. So now we're moving away from this linear equation of How do I add more, how do I deal with more calls with the same people? So one of the questions, as I said up front, was, that's great, but am I ready, and how do I start? I don't have the data. Do I have enough data? I think that's a bit of a misnomer in the world that we're living in specifically for the service management space. Obviously, if you have data, that's great. That doesn't mean you have to have data in order to start your journey. So when we look at the demo, we'll see scenarios of where you can essentially bootstrap the models using data that you have already, if not putting in some sample data, and the system gets better over time. And as you learning and training, and if you never start that journey, you're never going to get better. So you have to kind of make a decision to say, yes, I'm good to go. With regards to knowledge, a lot of organizations seem to believe that I've got to get my knowledge all tidied up. I've got to create all these knowledge articles before I can use the system. Again, if you have knowledge, that's useful in the sense that, yes, you can ingest that knowledge, you can apply some layer of semantic search or natural language understanding across that knowledge to improve the relevancy and finding the right knowledge based on what the user's asking for. But it doesn't mean you have to have knowledge to start that journey. Few organizations have that knowledge at a state where they'd say they're comfortable. If you've ever been through an ITSM implementation, in the early days, it was all around the CMDB, and many organizations spend lots of money trying to get their CMDB perfect because, that was the center of what we had to do. People then realized that you've got to draw a line of the level of detail that you need in order to keep your CMDB updated. Otherwise, the overhead of managing your CMDB at a granular level simply outweighs the benefit. And knowledge is a similar scenario. If you're going to wait to get your knowledge ready to present it, you're going to never get to a point where you can start. Users today, we see, don't tend to want to read knowledge articles. They more want to read knowledge snippets. It's simply the world that we live in. So give me 3 or 4 sentences of how to solve my problem. Don't give me a 5-page document, a well-authored knowledge article that I have to go through and set up. Yes, there's a certain subset of the target audience that's prepared to do that. But as a general thing, people simply want quick, short, sharp answers. And those can be dealt with via a chatbot or with knowledge snippets that are easily edited, created, and made available. So what are some of the benefits that you can anticipate from intelligent service management? Well, ultimately, for the business is reducing the cost per ticket, improving customer satisfaction. We know that customer satisfaction is driven by the key KPIs or metrics is how quickly can you solve my call? Can you solve it on first contact? And if you can't solve it on first contact, can you keep me updated? So solve my call quickly on first contact, and I'm going to be a happy customer. Reducing downtime, getting the right answers at the right time using the federated knowledge, break down those knowledge silos, first call resolution going up, obviously self-service resolution going up, and ultimately reducing the resolution times to get the business back to business. So that's some of the key points. So what does this actually look like when we start to look at artificial intelligence in the service desk space? So we'll have a look at 2 sides of the equation today. The most common one we see is around the classic chatbot. I need to deploy a chatbot on my self-service portal to be able to automate and handle those low volume calls. So what I might do is just very quickly switch over to my browser session over here. Okay, so what we see over here is our service management platform. And I've logged as an administrator, so we obviously see everything over here, but typically you would only see the self-service portal. And this would be specific to IT. The other thing that I would mention is when we're looking at self-service is to try and keep it as narrow and domain specific as possible. Where people tend to come unstuck is this view that we're going to stick a chatbot on our self-service portal and it's going to start to answer all the questions. If the domain is too broad and the number of types of requests you're trying to service straight off are too broad, you will fail simply because it's too broad to build any meaningful, measurable conversations. We tend to say to customers, start with your top 5 call types as a maximum that you'd want to automate and that are high volume, low complexity, and invariably that ends up being a password related one for most customers. So if we took a very simple one, self-service user comes in, or user comes into the self-service portal and says something as simple as forgot my password. Now, it's also worth noting when we look at from a service management perspective in particular is don't anticipate long, meaningful, properly written English sentences. We tend to find that 70 to 80% of all calls logged are only 3 to 5 words long. My view on that is that's really a precondition of Google search. We never really go and type in the full sentence. We kind of preempt the keywords we're looking for, and we kind of construct a pseudo sentence out of that. That's typically what you're going to expect to see. So if you're looking at training your model and you don't have existing data and you need to create some samples to bootstrap it, put yourself in the shoes of the user and what they would typically be asking for. Don't go and create long, meaningful sentences, train your natural language model on that, and then wonder why you're not getting the results you'd expect. Think of how the user, if I came into the self-service portal, typically I'd say, I forgot my password. Very straightforward, contains the basic information. So what we'll do then is from here, we now get prompted with which application are you looking at. And what we're wanting to do here is create an experience where we don't have enough information, so let's present the user with the options that are available to try and streamline this interaction. So in this instance, we'll simply go and say, let's say it's SAP. What we have over here is this is where the knowledge comes into play. So we don't have an automated way in which to reset the SAP password in this scenario. However, we do have some knowledge articles that may be useful. So make that knowledge available to the user and say, hey, I'm unable to step you through solving the issue. However, here's the knowledge that's most relevant to what you're looking for. Really trying to give them as much information as possible. And then what we'll see is if we're unable to help, it's important to have a warm handoff in some mechanism. There's nothing worse, and I think this is where chatbots got a really bad reputation, was, you'd go through the bot, I don't understand, please try again, and eventually people would be, this is just painful, and they'd walk away and say that was a really bad experience. Always think about having a warm handoff in some shape or form. Did this help? Yes, no. If no, what is the warm handoff? Typically in our system, we'll hand that off to go and log a ticket in the service desk and assign it to a service agent to pick it up and let the user know and say, okay, not to worry, we've logged a call for you and somebody will get back to you shortly. So in this instance, we'll say, yep, that worked. Everything's good. Anything else I can help you with today? No, it's all good. From a user experience, I've solved my issue, I'm happy. Now, if we gave some more context along the lines of forgot my Outlook password. So now we have the information that we need to be able to do something with it. So we're not going to prompt the user for additional information. We're going to say, okay, yep, I understand that, your application. We know that using the virtual agent, we're able to go and actually check things in the back end. So we know that the first thing, if I called the service desk and said, I forgot my Outlook password, is they're going to go check to see if your account has been disabled. We've automated that process over here and says, okay, that application uses the corporate single sign-on system. Let me check. Okay, it looks like your account is fine. It hasn't been disabled. So would you like to reset your password? Yes, I would. We now take them through the classic security challenges, questions, and we respond to those. We then go and check, we come back and say, okay, your account should now be unlocked. Can you please try it? So again, we don't want to say it's done, go away, it's working, and the user then tries it and it doesn't work. Now they're frustrated because they feel the chatbot or the virtual agent didn't actually solve their problem. and we could say then, yes, it's working, but let's in this instance say, no, it still hasn't worked. What we see over here is this is the warm handoff process, where we essentially go and we create a record incident where we'll go and assign it, we create it with a short description, and we provide the information over here. Obviously, we show this just purely for demo. Normally that would be hashed out with anything to do with passwords, but we provide the context of what was done so that the service desk agent who picks this up has that context of how the issue was being handled. Anything else I can help you with today? No. So that's an example of how we're able to do the warm handoff. But we can extend it from the passwords, which tend to be one of the most common things we see organizations using virtual agents to solve. And that could include things like, I need a guest Wi-Fi access. And we see the system comes up, understands, okay, yep, we know we get a large volume of guest Wi-Fi accesses because we have contractors coming in or based on certain projects we're running. So why not automate that process? We see over here, system comes up and says, okay, I need to ask you a few questions. Can you please give me the full name? So in this instance, we'll simply say it's John Wayne. When's it required from? Tomorrow. How long is it required for? A week. Just confirming the details and noting that you're able to convert the dates. Is this correct? Yes. And what the system does now is actually goes off again with back-end integration and automates that process. So it creates the passcode for us and confirms that it's emailed those details to me. When the contractor comes on site tomorrow, I have the password details, get them set up on Wi-Fi, and they're good to go. So a lot of opportunity to drive automation. And the key thing is starting off, as I mentioned, with a narrow focus of 3 to 5 of the high volume types of calls that you want to automate. As you can see where I've been able to solve my issues using the self-service agent, I've had a great experience. Problem solved. I've never had to contact the service desk. Excuse me. Whereas historically, for Wi-Fi access, I probably would have had to email the service desk to get an access code, and that could have taken 2 or 3 days. So just quickly switching tracks now over to where we look at it from the service desk agent and how we can apply artificial intelligence to automate things for the service desk agent. So in this instance, we'll simply say Dion is calling in and Dion needs to reset his Salesforce password. So invariably, even if you have self-service, you are going to get people that call into the service desk. That's just how they've always worked and how they will continue to work. So reset Salesforce password. And what you'll see is we're able to now use artificial intelligence to augment the service desk agent. We automatically understood from that this is a user management forgot password issue. It's for the Salesforce service and who it should be assigned to. So we've automated setting that. We've taken that a step further. We've also suggested actions that need to be taken to assist in automation. So typically what would happen is the service desk agent would swivel chair, have to go and do something, and then come back to the employee to provide them with information. Well, why not automate that in machine time? So the systems come back and said, would you like to email a link for their password reset? Yes, absolutely. Just click a button, it's done. Salesforce password for Dion Williams has been resent and email sent, set to result. So I significantly reduce the amount of latency on that call of having to swivel chair between different systems in order to service this user. If we look at some of the other examples that we're able to automate where we see high volumes of requests coming into the service desk. So ideally we'd want to solve these at self-service, but not always possible. So in this instance, again, Dion calls in and the request is to add Dion to the marketing distribution list. So add Dion to marketing Dion. So again, we see the system understands what we want to do, understands the classification, understands the service, etc. And it's propped up over here again with the suggested action that I'd want to take. Yes, I'd like to take that action. add Dion. This allows me to configure and set the values in case the system misinterpreted the details, but I could go over here and select any of the details, but we've correctly identified this and submit. We see the action being executed and the user has been added successfully. So really driving automation. And just as a last one in the interest of time, and then I'll certainly look at taking on some of the questions, is if I were to now have a look at one last scenario where we may want to drive automation, where Ben's called in and says SAP session is locked. The system has in the backend, and this speaks to, do I need the skill sets, etc. In this instance, the system has, based on previous calls, it has understood how people have resolved this issue in the past, and it has seen that whenever there's been an SAP session locked, the first action that the operator has taken, or the service desk agent, is check the SAP session. So we're able to then go, and it's already executed that action for us. We can see it said executed, Ben's session is locked. It's then suggested the next action that you'd want to take. So this is really where we start to augment the service desk to really deliver a consistent service experience. I simply click yes, execute, it has been unlocked, set to resolved. So a key thing that you need to be looking for when you're looking at AI is you don't want to be getting into the complexity of building models. There's a lot of data out there and pre-trained models, in particular around language models, that allows you to really enhance how systems understand and leverage that data to drive automation. You don't need to have the PhD data science skills. A lot of that has been abstracted today to a point where the systems take away the complexity and it makes it easier. Yes, there are certain things that you may need to do around configuration, but you certainly don't need to be a data scientist to be able to configure that. And ultimately, where to start and how do you measure success? Start narrow, start small. Don't try and boil the ocean to start with. Take a small number of high volume, low complexity issues that you're trying to solve. Start there, build up from there, get some runs on the board. The more success you have, the more you can start to build on it, and the more the business will start to realize the benefit and the value from it. So a little 2 minutes overdue from what I wanted to be from making time available for some questions, but any questions, please send them through. I see we have a question here. Do I need to consider language support? Yes, so look, language support is an interesting one. Yes, you do need to consider it. There are models. So for example, we only support English today. It's certainly something you need to consider if you're a multilingual business and you'd like to have a virtual agent on your service desk. We support English today because there's a large number of pre-trained language models, which allows us to boost our understanding straight out the box. But certainly if you are looking at a non-English language, you do need to consider what is available. That doesn't mean you can't build it out yourself. It just means you'll typically need a lot more data to train the model than if you can get a pre-trained model to bootstrap it. How much data do I need before I can start? Look, the data, in the service desk space, we know that when somebody contacts us, the most important thing we need to understand is what is their actual issue. And once we understand that, we know the track that we need to follow. So what that does, it allows us to significantly reduce the data requirements. And that goes back to the notion of, how narrow you start. The broader you start, the more data you need. The narrower you start, the less data you need. If I understand you have a password-related issue, it's fairly easy for me to be able to respond to that. So what are some of the advancements of AI around automating workflow and approvals? Workflows, as we can see over here, is, this would be an automation of workflow where we're really understanding the workflow is go and check something, come back and do that. So we're seeing a lot of that around workflow automation. Approvals, well, it depends on what you want to automate with approvals. You know, what you noticed over here when we were doing certain actions over here, some of them were firing automatically and others we had to go and manually do them. So you need to be mindful of trying to over-automate in the sense that there's an approval for a reason. Yes, can you define a feature set that says this can be automatically approved? Yes. But you do need to consider what that means from an audit and compliance if the machine is all of a sudden making decisions to say that this is approved. You know, don't assume that machines understand context. So if an approval is based on a broader set of context, then you wouldn't want the machine to be doing automated approvals. But certainly workflows of driving automation where based on understanding what an issue is, and then going and automating diagnostics, certainly that's an area that we see a lot of people using. So with that, we are on the time. There are one or two other questions that have come through. What I will do is I'll provide that with a link to the recording and answers to those questions. I shall send those through to yourselves. Hope you found the session useful and informative. By all means, if you have any other questions, please reach out to us. You have our details, or have a look on the website and contact us. If you'd be more interested in seeing what we're doing specific in the service desk space around automation and some of the options we have for customers, in particular if you're a ServiceNow customer and some of the ability we have to plug in and automate those environments, please do reach out. But otherwise, I'd like to thank you for joining the session and hope you found it informative, and the details will be sent through to you later today. Thank you very much, everybody.